on from which part of the world you are viewing this program. We welcome you at the ILO Facebook Live here at the Palais des Nations in Geneva at the International Labour Conference. And I am Olga Bogdanova, ILO Department of Communications. And the topic we are going to discuss today is: can universal social protection ever become a reality? It is a question, so we put a question mark here. And on the screen in front of me, I will see your questions, your feedback, your comments. So please send it to us, because they will greatly help us to shape up this very important discussion. Our guests today are top-level experts on the issue. Isabel Ortiz, Director, Social Protection Department, ILO. Hello, Isabel.
Hello, Olga.
And Valerie Schmidt, Deputy Director of this department. Hello, Valerie.
Hello.
And from the very beginning, let us agree on one thing. Let us keep in mind our audience, which is very diverse, and these are not only ILO or UN specialists. It's also students, sometimes school children even, and people from different parts of the world who may not be that knowledgeable in the topic and may not know the terminology and the basics as much as you do. So let us give basic definitions and background information to keep our audience and myself, because I am not an expert as well, on the same page. Okay?
Promise.
Before we get started, let us view a short video that presents ILO's World Social Protection Report that was launched last year, and that I think presents the topic to us in a very short and appealing form. Let's see it.
As much as 71% of the global population is not adequately protected at all. Worldwide, only 1 in 5 unemployed workers receives unemployment benefits. Only 35% of children worldwide enjoy effective access to social protection, and almost 1.3 billion are not covered at all. Only 41% of mothers with newborns receive a maternity benefit. And 68% of older women and men receive a pension. However, an important proportion of older persons, particularly in low-income countries, is still left unprotected. In many parts of the world, the right to health is not yet a reality, especially in rural areas where 56% of the population lacks health coverage, as compared to 22% in urban areas. More efforts are needed to extend coverage in many countries. In particular, it is important that austerity or fiscal reforms not undermine long-term development efforts. A significant number of developing countries have successfully achieved universal social protection schemes in recent years. Other countries can follow. Achieving universal social protection is possible. It is up to us to make it reality.
Watching ILO Facebook Live, and we are talking about universal social protection. Before we start talking to our experts, let me share with you one personal observation. When I pronounce the word protection, somehow it gives me a very, how shall I put it, very warm feeling of being secure in case something happens unexpected or difficult. So this word, I think, resonates with hopes and aspirations of each and every person in the world, which makes the issue that we are going to discuss of very global importance. Am I right?
You are completely right, Olga. Thank you very much for this nice comment. Effectively, why social protection is called that is this to ensure that people understand the importance of being protected. Social protection really refers to the old term of social security. That's how it was known, and is how it's known in all ILO environments. And the video you just saw, it was done with the World Social Protection Report that is monitoring SDG 1.3. And this is very important. That's why you had so many numbers. Because a year ago, always countries were showing the importance of social protection and were telling about the importance to cover everybody. But the numbers, the total coverage numbers, were not so popularized. So that's why we did this effort to collect information from all countries in the world, and then put it together in one single source, which now is giving the monitoring of this SDG 1.3. So let me say, what is this SDG? In 2015, all countries of the world agreed the Sustainable Development Goals at the UN General Assembly. And one of these goals, which all countries have agreed to do, is to extend the coverage of social protection systems so they become universal and they cover everybody, all members of society, and but particularly the poor and vulnerable. So that is a very important commitment. The country should work forward until 2030. That's why it's called the United Nations to the 2030 Agenda. And that's why the numbers you heard in the video. And the numbers are very important and very telling, because they tell us that about half of the world population are not covered by any social protection benefits. And then you hear the different types of benefits. Cash benefits for children that are very important, so children go to school and they have proper nutrition and they have, proper childhood. Of those, only 35% of children are covered. Then benefits for mothers with newborns, and that is very important to ensure that mothers, with a just born baby, are able to have the adequate nutrition, to be able to do all the necessary expenditures that are needed at the time for health, for other issues, and that only 41% of mothers in the world with babies are receiving these benefits. And these benefits are not expensive. So at the moment, it is a big push to ensure that our mothers with babies will have that benefit. And the same will happen for unemployed persons, or people that are poor and without jobs. And then also we have the important coverage of pensions for persons with disabilities and for older persons. And this is where actually the world is more advanced, on pensions for older persons. And this is about nearly 70% of all world older persons are covered. They receive a pension. So that is very important news and very positive on the overall context that only half of the world are covered.
Figures that we saw in the video and that you have just mentioned to us are huge. It shows that the whole issue is of real global nature, global scale. Mm-hmm. I really do not think that an individual country can cope with this challenge. And in my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, it requires very strong partnerships among countries and the international level. Maybe we should ask Valerie, can you say us a few words about this?
Yes, I agree with you, Olga. Not a single country or a single institution can really change this situation alone. It's really a global mandate. It's a mandate of all of us, and this is why it was also recognized as one of the priorities of the 2030 Agenda and SDG 1.3 in particular. At the global level, we have a number of partners that are really pushing for universal social protection by 2030. One of them, of course, is the the ILO because it's really part of our core mandate, our core DNA, to ensure that the right to social protection is a reality for all. But we also have the World Bank that has joined this global partnership in 2016 at the UN General Assembly. So President Kim from the World Bank and our Director General Guy Ryder together jointly launched this initiative for universal social protection. Together with these two major institutions, you have also all the UN family that is committed to universal social protection and social protection floors since 2009 already. You have also many development countries that are joining these forces because they believe in the universal social protection and they demonstrate that they can do it. So they serve as example for other countries. And you have many development partners as well that are supporting the efforts of the global community and of each individual countries. I would like also to add that we have the workers and employers organizations that have joined this major multi-stakeholder partnership through notably two networks that we have established at the ILO. One is the Workers' Network that is co-managed with ITUC and aims at equipping all the workers' organizations in fighting for the right to social security. And the other one is the Global Business Network for Social Protection Floors that aims at supporting employers' organizations in participating actively in policy dialogues on social protection at country level.
Here comes a question from Amonila. Is there an international organization that obliges countries to implement social protection for all?
Obliges? Yeah. I don't think there is an obligation. There is a moral obligation. There is also a commitment, which is in the 2030 agenda. So now countries have to report on the progress made in terms of the expansion of social protection. And there is also the fact that it's a multi-stakeholder partnership puts a lot of pressure and responsibility and accountability to the governments. In addition to the workers and employers, we also have a very strong movement within the civil society. More than 80 NGOs are part of the global 80, more than that, I think it's around 100 now, are part of the global coalition for social protection floors and are extremely active in raising awareness in pushing for social protection.
Well, I hope we will have the time to touch upon the issue of social protection floors because it's a very important issue as well. When I'm listening to the global commitments made at different levels, I keep on thinking, I'm talking on behalf of our audience, how, given the scale of the problem, of the issue, do you really think that all countries can really find the money to finance this universal social protection?
It's a very good question, Olga. Absolutely. All countries can progress towards financing universal social protection, even the poorest countries. But they need to do things a bit differently. Now, what we have seen is that actually no country in general objects to provide a pension to an older person or a cash benefit to a child. But generally they'll say, well, there are many competing development priorities, and at the moment it is difficult for us to do so. So it's not that countries don't want to do it, it's that they have many other competing development activities. And then somehow, this keeps going down the order of priorities. However, it is possible to finance universal social protection, as we're saying, even in the poorest countries. Now, generally what countries have been doing is to utilize, they look at the expenditures and they see where can I find some funds from the total budget of a country to try to, to finance this pension or this child benefit. And this becomes very, very difficult. Some countries have done it, and let me give you some examples. Costa Rica or Thailand, for instance, they use funds from defense in the past to actually fund social protection. But this is very difficult because it means you will have to remove the money from defense, those that work in defense, and give it to somebody else. So it can be done, but of course it's a difficult way to do it because it's a winning and losing thing. So what you need to try to do, and what governments are at the moment trying to do, is to extend the fiscal space, to extend the budget. So you have a larger budget, and in a way it's much easier. And how they are doing that? There are many ways. The first way that they are doing it is by expanding contributions, social security contributions. And they're doing that for formalizing many people in the informal economy.
That's another issue we'll talk, I hope, in more detail.
Well, that is very important. Because many people are with bad contracts and with difficult, precarious situations. And actually, if you formalize them, you give them a contract and you allow them to pay a simplified social security contribution, then that way you do have, you are having more funds for social protection. And there are fantastic cases worldwide here. Let me mention some: Argentina, Brazil, Tunisia, and Uruguay. In Uruguay, they did a fantastic program called monotax. And the monotax consists on a very simplified tax that is linked to the social security contribution. So then the micro enterprises, the small enterprises, where normally most people in informality are, they actually just pay this very, very simplified procedure and tax, and that is actually the social security contribution. And that got millions of people,
contributing
to social security. So this is a very good way. But there are many others. And other way, it is increasing tax revenues. And this is for those that cannot contribute. And then we have phenomenal examples. And here the key issue is not to use regressive taxes like VAT, like consumption taxes, because these, you see, everybody pays the same, so they are regressive. Like if you buy a sack of rice, the poor pay the same as the rich. So in a way it's a regressive tax. It is not an equitable tax. You need to tax these activities that are actually of more wealthy activities. No? And let me give you some examples. Bolivia or Zambia or Mongolia, they actually are, Mongolia is taxing copper exports, so mineral exports that the country is doing. And with this mineral export, it's a little tax on these exports of copper that they do outside. They have been financing a universal child benefit for all Mongolians. It's a beautiful example. And Brazil, for many years, was financing the extension of social protection also with a very small tax on the financial sector. And otherwise, the financial sector was not paying any taxes. So there are very beautiful examples related to tax, and Bolivia, many others I can give you. And then there are other avenues, so this is not just one, okay? So there are many others, and countries are considering them, like fighting illicit financial flows that are illegal. And I know this looks like jargon, but this is money laundering, corruption, and many other issues that should not be happening in countries. You fight that, and there's billions of dollars that can be used for universal social protection. And then there are other issues like tapping into reserves, like Chile or Norway, like restructuring or managing debt. Sometimes countries have very high debt and they have to be paying, the servicing this debt, and that is expensive. So many countries, actually more than 60 countries in recent years, have restructured their debt, renegotiating the debt, and with the savings of that, they have invested them in social sectors.
This brings us to the issue. Let me remind that we are watching the ILO Facebook Live, and we are discussing universal social protection. Let me ask you a question on behalf of our viewers about, in fact, how many countries have done it already. There are good examples, but what is the statistics? The countdown till the year 2030 has already started. Can we assess the progress? How is it going?
Yeah. So what is interesting is that and goes against all the preconceived ideas that social protection is too expensive, it's difficult to implement. What is interesting is that many countries in the developing world have already achieved universal social protection for some benefits, some guarantees. So it can be pensions, it can be healthcare, it can be child allowances, it can be a public works program for the people in the rural areas. So there are many ways for countries to implement or to achieve progressively universal social protection. And we have, when we have launched the initiative, the Universal Social Protection Initiative, USP 2030, this was in 2016 at the beginning of the SDGs countdown, as you said. We had documented already 23 country cases that had achieved already universal social protection
on
specific one or two specific aspects. So this includes, for instance, Argentina and Mongolia on the children for the child allowances. On health, we have China, we have Thailand that have achieved universal coverage in a very limited number of years. Even Rwanda as well, Colombia. On maternity, we have the case of Argentina that has achieved universal coverage. For disability and old age, we have many cases of countries like Thailand, South Africa, Lesotho, Bolivia, Timor-Leste that have achieved universal pensions for people in old age and also people with disabilities.
So may I interrupt you for a second? There is a question. Is it too late for Asian countries to achieve social protection for all by the year 2030? Your examples say the opposite.
Yeah, because if you look at the process, when a country decides to achieve universal coverage, of course there is a political will first, there is the support, the finding sustainable sources of financing, as Isabelle explained, but this can be achieved in a very limited number of years once the decision is made. But what is important and what we also support at the ILO is that these decisions are based on national dialogues, so that all the country, all the different parties in the country, so the different stakeholders, not only the government but also workers and employers, civil society at large, and to some extent the broad public and academia, can really participate in the development of a universal social protection system that is really aligned with their history, their values, so that it becomes also sustainable. And to increase sustainability, we also promote the fact that these universal social protection systems need to be embedded, anchored in law, in national legislations. This is very important so that people can really have the right to social security, that it's not a handout, it's a right, and that they can claim for that right.
Let me pick up on what you have just said and ask a question about informality. Mm-hmm. Okay, we proclaim the right of every citizen for basic social protection. How about informal workers, for many of whom it is maybe the only way to earn money for their subsistence, but they do not pay taxes and they often represent a large proportion of the workforce. With the universal social protection approach, these people are also entitled to basic social protection. Is that right?
Well, you want to? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Yes, of course they are entitled. They are a part of the country, so everybody's entitled to this right. Mm-hmm. So, but the question is more how to make this right a reality, and this we agree with you. It's very difficult because people in the informal economy. It's a diverse reality, you know. So you have different types of workers there, and it's very important to try to know who they are and to try to identify how we can reach them out with the social security, social protection programs, to ensure also that these programs, these schemes respond to their needs and also respond to their constraints, because there is a financial issue, there is also a registration issue. There are many problems that need to be overcome so that we can cover them. But we see that social protection can also be a tool to facilitate and to accelerate formalization, because as soon as you are registered for a social protection scheme and program, so first you have an identity, you exist in the system. Second, little by little, people know more about you. They know first what kind of occupation you have, what type of revenues you have. So little by little, and this was the excellent example from Uruguay with the monotax, you can incorporate or include these populations in the whole system, and not only social protection but also the tax systems, etc. And little by little they become formal.
You are watching ILO Facebook Live, and we are discussing universal social protection. A very interesting discussion we are having, and I can see that it has evoked much interest in our audience. The question from Alex: how do you see the future of contributory social security systems, as effective extension of coverage will require more public financing?
It's a very good question. Look, systems, generally countries achieve universality. This is coverage for everybody through a mix of schemes. And generally you have the contributory schemes. This is where people pay a contribution, like for social security, and to be covered in a number of schemes. And this is for those that have formal employment and that they can contribute, or they have at least they have sufficient income so they can contribute. And for those that generally don't have sufficient income to contribute, meaning they are poor or they are very low income, then for those there is social assistance. And time to time, societies also do universal schemes, simply a one-time, thing, like in many African countries, for instance, because it becomes very difficult to there's not so much administrative capacity, and countries thought it was a right to give older persons a pension, so simply they gave all other persons a pension. So we have many African countries with these social pensions that are for everybody. For instance, Botswana. Botswana is a beautiful case because a country wealthy with lots of diamonds, and they did not know how to redistribute this money, so they did a universal pension. So all of the persons are actually covered by a social pension. And so is Namibia, and so you have other countries, Lesotho and others in Africa. So, but it's a mix. But generally countries, if you think of Europe, if you think of the Americas, North and South, if you think of many Asian countries, it's a mix of contributory social insurance and then social assistance. So the trend at the moment is actually an increase of contributory and also an increase of social assistance, simply because the coverage is being extended. So both schemes, the social insurance and the social assistance, both of them are increasing. So it's not that one will take over the other, unless a country decides to do so, but generally what you get, most countries opt to have this mixed system, and both of them continue extending.
You're watching ILO Facebook Live, and we are discussing universal social protection, and we have only 5 minutes left. Time flies when you are talking about such vital things as universal social protection. Our viewers will not forgive me if I do not mention the issue of pensions. Population aging, younger generations may not be able, in the future, to sustain pension systems in their countries. How, in this context, you see universal social protection for people of their retirement age? Very briefly.
It's a very good question. In effect, populations are aging, and this is very, very positive because it means we are living longer.
Okay.
And that is very good. So, because always people talk about pensions like a cost and kind of the negative terms, and this is not true. Actually, there is a flourishing economy, what is called the silver economy, which is flourishing out of older persons that now are having a more intense life, and they are having, holidays tailored for them, retiring homes that are attractive and sexy.
Career.
Yes, exactly. They are at
yeah.
work, and there are many things. Okay, but all that is conditional to have adequate pension benefits. And that is an issue particularly in higher income economies, not so much in developing countries that are extending. They don't have the problem of aging so marked. They have lots of young people, so they are advancing normally. But in the advanced economies, in the higher income economies, yes. There have been a number of very important pension reforms done, particularly since 2010. And many of these reforms had this austerity drive, this focus on fiscal consolidation and cuts. And that has become at the moment a problem, because we are seeing a re-emergence of old age poverty in many European countries. We estimate that as many as 19 European countries, pensioners are going to receive much lower pensions in the future because these reforms have not been adequate. They have been done with a fiscal objective only. They led to many cuts, and they were not able to do the right reform. Now, reforms, according to ILO, they need to balance equity and sustainability. You need sustainable systems, but at the same time, you need to ensure that benefits are adequate so people can have a retirement in dignity. And promote all this economy that is also emerging and is going to create millions of jobs. So the issue of the pension adequacy is very important at the moment. It's been discussed in in many environments at the European level and at the international level, and hopefully we hope that reforms will ensure that this benefit adequacy is there.
On this positive note, let us conclude our discussion on the ILO Facebook Live. We were talking about universal social protection, and coming back to the topic of our discussion, that was actually a question. I think based on what we learned today, we can turn this question into a statement that universal social protection can become a reality. Is that right?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.